Welcome to Unit 4. In this unit, we're going to explore emotional triangles and how emotional triangles uh, help us understand crisis and sabotage. But the first several units are going to consider the kind of ins and outs of triangles. What are they? The laws of triangles, that is, how they form, how they operate, the reality of interlocking triangles, and how stress functions in triangles. I suspect this will be operationally one of the units that will make the most sense immediately, but over time takes the longest to become aware of. So, what are triangles? An emotional triangle refers, and this is a quote from Edwin Friedman, the manner in which the relationship between any two people or a given individual and his or her symptoms can be a function of an often unseen third person relationship or issue between them. Close quote. Um, Emotional triangles are essentially the building blocks of relationship systems, and they function predictably, irrespective of gender, irrespective of race, of class, irrespective of culture or anyone's background, or even psychological profile. Much has been there's much out there today about enneagrams and, of course, the Myers-Briggs and other personality profiles. Triangles function irrespective of these things. They function irrespective of relational context, of family, business, the kind of business, or even the nature or severity of the problem. Emotional triangles basically follow a few straightforward rules. First, they form out of someone's discomfort with another. They are self preserving, and really they resist all attempts to change them. This helps us understand the basic functioning of homeostasis, that is, why a system or how a system achieves balance. Uh, Triangles interlock with and reinforce other emotional triangles. They become small building blocks that develop into an entire system. They make it hard for people to alter their patterns of thought and behavior. As you begin to recognize triangles in your own life, perhaps even in your own family, you begin to understand why it's hard for people to move forward, why it's hard for people to change, why it's hard for people to change their behavior. This is particularly true in churches when a church leadership wants to move a church forward in whatever that forward looks like. A church will often resist that change because it's hard for people to alter their patterns and their behaviors because they're so rooted in how they operate in these triangles. And then finally, triangles transmit a system's stress to its most responsible or most focused member. Um, Another way of saying this is that the stress of a system or in triangles often gets zoomed in on, or another way of saying this, anxiety often lands on the weakest or most responsible person in the system. Now, these are some basic rules of how they function. I will talk about basically in a little bit the 7 laws. Now, once we understand the logic of emotional triangles, we now have a means by which to make emotional processes observable. That is, triangles enable the observation of a system's emotional processes. Um, these emotional triangles support the claim that one's position, rather than one's nature, their race, their gender, their context, their culture, that doesn't matter. Triangles support the claim that I made earlier on in earlier videos that one's position rather than their nature is the most determinative factor within a relational system. They also help explain why self-differentiation, which we talked about earlier, can be so effective. Nearly every issue of leadership and the difficulties that come with leadership can be framed in terms of emotional triangles. Now, remember, this leadership can be a leadership in a family, a leadership in a church, leadership in a business, leadership in government. It doesn't matter. And these can be framed in terms of the difficulties, the struggles that come with leadership, uh, can be framed in terms of emotional triangles. And they include motivation, clarity, decision making, resistance to change, um, imaginative gridlock, and even, as Friedman says, a failure of nerve. Leaders learn, and as leaders learn to recognize and analyze triangles, they will be better equipped, better able to understand the connections between people and the issues and the precise structures of difficulties, and as such, better equipped to overcome them. Now, there are many, many different examples of possible emotional triangles. Within the family, they often are pretty easy to identify. They can involve spouses and any third person, a child, a lover, a relative, an in law, a boss, a friend. It could be a mother, father, and child, a parent, and any two children, a parent, his or her child, and his or her own parents, a parent, a child, and a symptom of that child, like doing poorly in school or something like that. Um, in work systems, it could be a parent, a boss, and uh, an employee, boss, and employees underneath that employee. It can be the board. It could be a CEO and any number of people underneath. I mean, the range, the possibilities. Emotional triangles really can exist in workplaces and in any relational context. Wherever people are in relationship, triangles exist. So understanding what they are and how they function is critically important for understanding, basically basic systems realities. So that's what triangles are. They are basically the building blocks of emotional systems. That is, of relationships between people. In the uh, videos that are coming, we'll consider how they form and how they operate. Thank you so much.